This is an AMI podcast.
If your heart is broken, make art with the pieces. Welcome. This is AMI Audiobook Review, where we talk all things audiobooks on this weekly podcast. I'm your host, Ramia Amuddin, and this week we don't have Nisreen Abdelmajid with us, but we do have Jacob Szymanski behind the glass, helping us tech through the show, and of course joining us for some audiobook conversation. Now let's go back before I started talking to the quote that you heard. And this quote is part of our theme for May, where we're chatting resilience and featuring resilience quotes throughout the month, because why not, first of all? And second of all, because it's just a great month to kind of come out of the depths of winter and cold and any other type of shedding our skin and being able to have pushed through the winter. We're reflecting and thinking that's resilience. And this one is from Blueprint for a Breakthrough. It was released in 2013 by Shane Koizen, and that's who is behind that quote. And I particularly loved it because it mentions art. I mean, there's a bit of that wordplay of if your heart is broken, make art with the pieces. And what's really genuinely beautiful about this quote that I find is there is so much behind that concept. It's the lemon to lemonade. It's the channel your frustrations into positive and motivation. There is no denying of challenge, right? There's no denying that we go through the struggles and the challenges that we go through in life. And that could look, so different and so familiar. But what we do with that, what we do with the energy, what we do with the broken pieces is part of the healing, is part of the process of moving forward. And that is the connection between the past, present, and the future. So I loved it. I loved the way that it was presented in such a poetic manner. But I loved that, we're not saying, toss whatever it is that you went through and move on. We're saying, okay, take what you've been through and let's create something new out of it. Let's move it into a different type of energy. So beautiful. And like I said, quotes on resilience through May. So thanks for indulging us in that. Now, let's take a look at the CELA homepage. We love to take a glance at this, celalibrary.ca, and those are our friends from the Center for Equitable Library Access. The 3 featured titles that have been up there for a couple of weeks, and we'll continue to go through them in our pause or play. Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mendel. This is a general fiction category. We also have Her Hidden Genius by Marie Benedict. We talked about this last week. It's a historical fiction. Shout out to Sarah Fair for taking both mine and Nazreen's pauses on that book and making them plays just through, her elaborate convincing skills. It was really good. And then the last one on the featured category is Sari, Not Sorry. And Sari is spelled S-A-R-I, as in the Indian and South Asian outfit. Sari, Not Sorry by Sonya Singh. And this is a romance. We'll get to that one in a second. So people who are joining us today, heads up, that's our pause or play. And I think that with the featured titles category, what's really great is these aren't recommendations from us. These aren't, would you check these out because I've checked them out. Now, obviously, there is the ripple effect of talking about these on the show, and usually our contributors, Amir Khan, coming at the end of the month and saying, hey, I have checked out these featured categories, or other people from the community saying, yeah, we were able to, read the CELA homepage featured titles. And that's a cool way to kind of book club it at the end of the month. But these are generally handpicked by our friends from CELA. We're talking Karen McKay and Teresa Power, the 2 guests who join us at the start of the month. They handpick these recommendations. They put them up there, and it's a variety. So as you can tell just from the 3 that we've heard about today. We have a general fiction, a historical fiction, and a romance. We have some cultural representation of different things going on there. And if you've checked out the last 2 episodes of AMI Audiobook Review, you know that it is quite different from book to book to book. And there's all these other ways throughout the Sila website that you can check out, what's trending, what are new releases, what is popular right now, etc., etc., etc. There's lots of ways to kind of find your recommendations and find your reads. But this is a nice, easy opportunity for us to just pick up something that we normally may not check out and just go with it, because usually these are human narrated. They are very good reviews after we check them out. So let's just keep doing them. I'm your host, Ramya Amudan, and this week we are joined by Jacob Szymanski in place of Nisreen Abdelmajid. So he's going to be taking place in the next section, or taking part, I should say, with Pause or Play. We're picking one of the books from the featured categories on the Sila homepage, CELA Sari, Not Sorry, by Sonya Singh. This is a romance, and Sari is spelled Sari, not like the Demi Lovato song. Okay, let's get a synopsis of the book. Manny Dokra is the beautiful young CEO of Breakup, a highly successful company that helps people manage their relationship breakups. As preoccupied as she is with her own business, she's also planning her wedding to handsome architect Adam Jameson while dealing with the loss of her beloved parents. For reasons Manny has never understood, her mother and father who were born in India, have always wanted her to become an all-American girl. So that's what she did. She knows next to nothing about her South Asian heritage, and that's never been a problem until her parents are no longer around. And an image of Manny that's been photoshopped to make her skin look lighter appears on a major magazine cover. Suddenly, the woman who built an empire encouraging people to be true to themselves is having her own identity crisis. But when an irritating client named Sammy Patel approaches Manny with an odd breakup request, the perfect solution presents itself. If they both agree to certain terms, he'll give her a crash course in being Indian at his brother's wedding. Along the way, Manny discovers much more than she could have ever anticipated. Gotta love that cliffhanger. We're going to go around the table for Pause or Play, starting with Jacob. Pause on this book? Meh. Or Play? Give it a shot.
I'll give it a play. That's quite the synopsis. I feel like it gave us like a lot more information than the regular synopsis. I would definitely give this a play because, well, one, it's really out of my comfort zone, out of what I normally read. So just for that reason, like just to switch things up a little bit, see if I can get into it. And two, it sounds like it's tackling some really interesting themes of culture, which is something that's also kind of out of what I usually read. So absolutely, I'd give that a play.
Okay, awesome. So last month, one of the books, as part of my book club, was Quiet in Her Bones. Very similar, vibes with that one. I mean, it was a murder mystery, so no, not at all. But in other circumstances, it was an Indian guy. His mother had just passed away. There's so much cultural reference to what was happening in his life and the identity crisis behind different things. Super heavy book, but really interesting that this one would appear on the featured books category on Sila right after that read, which was also on the list last month. It was the batch before this. So I'm curious about that, and absolutely for the cultural learnings. For me as a Sri Lankan, there are a lot of ties to Indian culture, South Asian culture. So I would also am intrigued with this, but not necessarily a play yet for me. Going to continue going around the table. Kathrine, pause or play on this title?
I would play. That sounds like a very interesting book. A lot of culture, a lot of mystery, and that cliffhanger that you left us. I think that also kind of drew me, and I'm wondering what it
might end up being, really.
Yes, exactly. cliffhanging there. What's going to
Uh-huh.
happen between her and the new client is what I'm thinking.
Also, with it being a wedding, because that's where this is, I think the bulk of the book is going to take place, right? The family, I don't know if either of you have been to an Indian wedding, but most of them, minus COVID, are just big, humongous events and, multiple days, hundreds and hundreds of people traditionally, so many rituals and events and just the schedule is absolutely tight. The outfits are gorgeous. The food is everywhere. There's music and it's a huge affair. It's massive.
I can only imagine that an Indian wedding is ripe for creating conflict and outpouring of emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, we never know where it's going to go, really. But that's a nice way to kind of wonder what would happen. So we'll see. I think I'd press play as well on this one. So thanks for giving your opinions. Sari Not Sorry by Sonya Singh, romance on the CELA homepage, CELA Library. .ca. Now let's move to checking in with our guest of the day, an avid book reader, opening up the space to review, discuss, recommend, browse, conceptualize, and reminisce on audiobooks. Kathrine Vatcher is joining us on the show this week. Kathrine, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's find out exactly how much you do read. Can you gauge how much you get through in a week, a month, a year? Any of the above?
How much I get through. It depends on the climate outside. If it's hot or cold. If it's nice and cold and you want to cuddle up with a nice blanket and a warm tea, you can get through a couple books in a month.
Okay, that's nice. And when you say curl up with the blankie and have this book, are we talking book on our tablet or physical book flipping pages?
I do both. I have Kindle on my phone, and I have a Kindle itself, and I also have the book. So, and then I take my library with me wherever I go on my Kindle, which is on my phone.
Right. And how big is your actual physical library?
Oh, I have like boxes of books everywhere. It's ridiculous.
Wow.
Physical books all over the place. What I see, I want, I get. And then I download it. So if I'm not reading it, the physical one, I'm at the grocery store, I'm still reading it on my Kindle so I can have it continually reading it.
So there's this feature, Audible members know of this, called Whisper Sync, right? When you have an Amazon Kindle
Yeah.
and the Audible account, right? And so you can Whisper Sync, which is basically where you picked up or left off, or you can pick up where you left off in an audiobook or an ebook, and it'll just seamlessly sync with the other approach. And you're doing this, but with the physical book and ebook. That's amazing.
Just love it. I have it. I remember first before I got my Kindle, someone said, I have my library with me when I go on the airplane. I'm thinking, that is awesome, because I would carry a backpack full of books, and it was so heavy. So now I've decided after that point, I'm thinking, oh, Kindle is awesome. I have a library. So I have all these books on my phone, and or my Kindle, whichever I choose to bring with me. It's just remarkable. Technology is great.
Now, of course, there's the convenience factor, right? Like you're mentioning, you don't carry around 5 books that you're reading at a time and have to pack your suitcase with it. But is there still, you mentioned the weather, but is there still room for mood? At home, are you most likely reading the physical book because it just feels cozier?
Definitely.
Yeah, that's amazing.
At least you don't have to charge your physical book, right? You don't have to worry about your battery dying on your physical book.
Nobody ever points that out, Kathrine. You're right.
No, but it's true.
You're absolutely right.
You get into a very good part, the battery flashes on your Kindle. Oh, no, I need to charge it, but I can't finish reading it. Yeah.
Exactly. And when you're using AirPods for an audiobook, it's the same thing, but now you got to make sure your phone and your AirPods and the case are charged.
Yeah.
Completely.
That's true. Very true.
Completely agree. So do you have a favorite place in your home? Do you have like a rocking chair and a book nook going on?
Well, I have a few favorite chairs, or I could just lie down and read it too. Wherever the kids are not, that's where my favorite place is.
I always wonder about this for people who read physical books and fall asleep. How do you bookmark that? Because with the audiobooks, and I'm assuming with the ebooks, it's to some degree you can bookmark, right, or set timers and sleep timers. But if your physical book falls down while you're falling asleep,
That's true. You just hope that you remember the last word that you read, and then you can go look for it.
exactly. They got to think of a different way to do it. But yeah, okay. Maybe it
Yeah,
flips itself.
maybe.
So let's get into the kinds of books that you particularly enjoy or are usually picking up. How would you pick a book? What draws you in?
I like more true stories based on life events than fiction. I'm more of a true person. History, like of world events that has happened, and someone's memoirs. So the one that I was reading, or I have read, and I reread it, is about a boy, his life, and what has happened with him. It just draws me into the book with him. I like those better than fantasy things.
And now, is it because of the real life factor, or have you had the opposite reaction where you read fiction and just weren't able to, relate to it or engage with it the same way?
Yeah, I think I have read fiction before, like James and the Giant Peach. That was the first fiction book that I think I read when I was a young kid. And I love that book. I love the movie. It was great. But since becoming an adult, I think I really like the true life events that you kind of can relate to, things that you know that has happened out there, as opposed to fiction. That's just my preference alone. But history, I love history more now than I did as a child. I just didn't like history whatsoever. Now I love it. I don't understand why. Could be an
Right.
age thing, but yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe as this is my own take on it, but as I get older, same thing. I like reading memoirs. I look for autobiographies, and not just my favorite celebrities or something, but when it sounds like an interesting story or experience, I'm curious about it, and not just jumping to fantasy all the time. But I wondered, like, as a kid, what that disconnect is. It's more like we're tapping into our own imagination and riding along with others' imaginations versus real life events. Maybe there's this taboo that, oh, history is boring. When I was a kid, that
Yeah.
was definitely how I felt.
Yeah, me too. The books at when we went to school, our history books were so thick. Like, who wants to look at that anyway?
Yeah, and
But now we pick up the thickest book we can find at the store, and it's a true story. It's like, well, we got to sit down with this book, and we're not
Right.
stopping until we're finishing it. It's just
Right.
different seasons of our life, I guess.
How about the rereadability for history? Like, are there books that, memoirs or autobiographies or historical nonfiction books that you've picked up that you're able to reread again?
Yeah, yes.
And does
This
it
one
depend?
I've read again. No, I just really I'm just fascinated by all the history and different things jump out at me as I'm reading them. I think, oh, I missed that the first time. This is really neat the second time or the third or whatever.
Huh. That's fascinating because, most of the time when I do it with fantasy or like fiction books, there's definitely that same thing. But with history, it's like, kind of what you said about reading a textbook again.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I try and research when I'm reading through it. I try and research to see, okay, yeah, this is really cool, and this kind of had a ripple effect in different cultures or different situations or whatever the story is about, and just to see who else was affected at that time or
Right.
the different things that happened. Yeah.
So let's get to the recommendation that you have for us today. It's called A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Bey. And this is something that you wanted to share with us for our listeners.
Yes. It's a memoir of a boy soldier. He wasn't always a boy soldier. I'm not going to give all the good points in here, but it starts, he's only 12 years old, and this guy's life as you know it is just going to be fall totally apart. And there was talks of war happening in his country in Sierra Leone, and civil unrest and poverty. And it's hard enough to grow up when you're a kid, especially at 12 years old. You're going through your adolescent years, and you don't want to do this. You want to do things your own way. But this child didn't have chance to become a child. None of his peers either, because they were thrown right into the civil unrest and this war. And this book is just fabulous. And the description and how this young man is telling his life story, and just as you think, oh my goodness, it can't get any worse, it does get a lot worse, and it does get a lot better at different points of time. And so it just keeps you hanging on, pulling you all the way through, and you're just rooting for him, and like, oh my goodness, this poor guy and his friends and his family, and someone lived this life. It's like, how can someone live this life? It's your heart breaks for them as you're going through the book with them. That's how I felt with it.
And for you, is that the draw-in point, that you're, emotionally following this character emotionally and constantly reminding yourself this is real? Like, this is not, and that's the difference between nonfiction and fiction, right? Because there are a lot of emotional reads in the fiction category as well, based on real circumstances, based on what people go through in real life. But at the end of the day, it's not a real person. Whereas in this one, you're laughing, you're crying, you're, engaging, and it is a real person.
Yes, very much so. Very much. You just feel for this guy, especially where, like, he was only 12 years old, and being a parent, it's like, oh my goodness, my 13-year-old, I can relate. Put him, like, if you think of him in that position, it's, oh my goodness, wow. It's very real to you when you're reading it, knowing that it is his life, and it was true, and it has happened, and it affected so many others as well. And it's history, like, that is history of our world.
Do you tend to follow up? I wonder, the impressions that books like this make on people. And some of us are so adamant on continuing to follow their journey, go and follow it up with watching interviews or videos or other books, pick up other books written by this person, or just whatever it is to kind of continue giving them that human factor, right? And I'm curious about whether you do that.
I do that on some people, yeah. I do look for them and see what their life is now, what they have accomplished, if they've made it, of course, and the impact they've had on their community, even my life, they have to have an impact on you somehow.
Right.
Like, are you more compassionate towards other people because of reading the story about this 12-year-old who, was thrown into a civil war and so much lost in his life, and how he came out on top? So you're changed a little bit after reading these stories.
Yeah.
True stories, of course.
And that's the type of impact that is super powerful, right? Like, whether you're reading something and you're going, wow, this is fascinating, or you're saying, my God, I can't imagine that someone went through something like this, or, they pull apart. Because, I compare this back to movies, Kathrine, and when you watch a movie, let's say about war, and things were depicted so, strongly and violently, you can step away from that, because that's a 2-hour experience, and you're still an audience member, right? You're still just kind of looking at a screen, watching what's going through. And of course, it's evoking emotion. But when you get into a book and someone recaps and recounts their life story for you, it takes you to a deeper place inside yourself, discovering that from someone.
Very much, very much. And that's what he did. That's what Ishmael did at this memoir that he's written. He wanted everyone to hear what exactly his perception of what he saw and how it made him feel. And he does it very well in this book. He tells about what he's seen and how he's felt, and how it felt like his friends felt. And I forget sometimes when we're reading stories, the impact that it's had on that person, like really deeply.
exactly. And the courage it took for them to write it
Very
down.
much.
Yeah, and bring it to
And
us.
relive it.
Exactly.
Relive it like it's
Relive it. Yeah, absolutely. Kathrine, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for getting into it with us. I really appreciate the depth of these conversations, especially about nonfiction books. So we'll definitely have this in the show notes for anyone who wants to check out the book A Long Way Gone by Ishmael Beah, Beah for the last name. Thank you, and we hope to have you back on the show soon.
my pleasure. Thank you very much.
Kathrine Vatcher joining us here on AMI Audiobook Review. That's a wrap for this week. We'll be back next week with another episode and a brand new conversation. Until then, happy audiobook listening.
This was an AMI podcast. For more accessible media, visit ami.ca.